are in for a treat today. Bianca Nita is a children's book illustrator, originally from an idyllic village in Romania and now working from London. Her illustrations are colorful, expansive, dreamlike, full of details that set the mind's gears into action to try to assemble the connections between the multiple moving parts. After creating an app that featured archetypes in the form of superheroes designed to incite emotional reactions and sow introspection in children in her native country, she visited schools, hospitals, and small villages for underprivileged children. She then turned her attention to exclusively working with authors who celebrate core values and diversity in children's literature. Bianca has a dreamlike view of the world, which she paradoxically structures so clearly with her vision of what she wants her influence in the world of children's literature to be, and frankly, how she wants to show up in the world in general. Don't miss the end when Bianca shares ideas of how to extend the experience of reading books through linguistics and art. They're absolute gems that you'll be able to use in the classroom and at home. You are going to want to rush, not walk, to the nearest bookstore with a list of the books Bianca has illustrated, so you and your children, or just you, can sit and bathe in how she's brought the written word to light. You'll find other inspirational educational stories at Doodles with Donna and activities to introduce illustrated books at scaffoldingmagic.com. Now, find your favorite pillow, lean back, and let Bianca Nita's world of illustration unfold before you. Bianca, welcome. Thank you so much for giving me this time. And as I said, I was looking at your illustrations and they're just so exciting. Bianca, you're from Romania. Can you tell me what you're doing, what your transnational life is like right now?
Well, so I'm from Romania and I moved like 2 years and a half ago to London. And it's been quite a tough transition for me. It's the first time I went to live in a different country. Let's say in the beginning, I didn't feel this because I had my partner with me and we were going out sometimes playing sports. This is what we love to do in our spare time. But as time passed by, I found myself a bit lonely there and started to connect more with other people because I felt like I need to be surrounded with more like-minded people. And kind of then I started my freelance journey in illustration because until then I was working with someone. We were doing some very nice work for children on emotional intelligence. We were developing apps based on storytelling. It was very interesting and very much fun. But when I moved, I just found myself needing to try a different path. And this was it, illustration. But not any kind of illustration, but for meaningful projects, which means projects that spoke to me, to my interest in empowering kids, teaching them values, helping them connect with themselves and discover themselves better. So I started looking for this project. It was not that easy in the beginning. I didn't have like a public portfolio. It was not too much to show. I had something, but it was not too much. And slowly but surely, I found those clients that made a lot of sense to me, who had a great vision, and just started selecting this kind of clients and projects that really inspired me.
Okay, so right now you're working with clients in London and you're working on emotional intelligence. Would we say that it's specifically in the educational world, or is it in the secular world as well?
It's not necessarily on educational work or related to emotions or emotional intelligence, but it needs to be something that empowers kids in a way or another, something that is helpful in some way. It can be fun. It can be a very fun project, but if it has an added value to kids, if it stimulates their imagination, if it makes them think of some stuff in a different way than they would normally, then that's better. And I don't necessarily work with clients from the UK. I work with any client from anywhere in the world who I connect with.
Absolutely wonderful. And do you work in English speaking materials exclusively or any language?
Any language, but it happened to be English so far. There are people who connected with me from other countries, but like their books, their manuscript was in English because they wanted to reach a wider audience to make their vision more global. So everything was in English so far. If there's a language we can connect through, that's fine. I also speak French and I understand Spanish. I can speak Spanish, not that great, but yeah, it needs to be like a point of connection so we can understand, because also like a manuscript is something very sensitive. And you need to be able to tell the illustrator what's your vision, to communicate and really understand the fine details.
No, and what I was going to say is that, of course, you speak French, and of course, you probably speak Spanish better than you're letting on, because Romanian is a Latin language as well. And so there's an easy transition into it. And English, we all know, is the easiest language to learn, maybe not to read, but to speak. It's very simple structure. What I'd love to know, you're saying that you're looking for the same values that you believe in. Could you tell us some more about your values? You said imagination, looking at things through different perspectives. What else are your really important values?
Yeah, so I think truth, whatever holds true to you as a person, whatever feels genuine and authentic to yourself, like just expressing who you are and seeing this more and more around us, because this is a thing that I really love in children's books right now. It's like a trend that they try to encourage kids more and more to connect with who they are and discover what they like to do and what makes them shine somehow, and what are their unique gifts and talents. And notice this also in other people. Notice the differences, but not in a way that, okay, you're different than me, but it's like something to celebrate. You're different, but we have so much in common. But this is what you do very well. And this is such a great thing. So I feel like it's such a broad theme, a lot related to equal chances, let's say, care about environment and the world, empathy, generosity, love. Yeah, I feel like these are core values to me.
Okay, what I do know, when I was researching some of the books you've illustrated, you've done some on mindfulness. Is that right?
Yeah.
So mindfulness is a key word right now in Spain and probably in many other countries. And what I really like about it is that from the youngest ages, it gives students exactly what you were saying. It gives children the importance of finding out about themselves. I was just speaking with this lovely teacher in Armenia, Victoria Grigori. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And she was saying it's a very interesting phenomenon that I wasn't aware of in Armenia, because I know very little about it anyway. She said that because it used to be a country under the dictates of the Soviet Union, they still have not completely themselves emotionally and societally from the sort of dictatorial perspective. In other words, they're supposed to be obedient still. And she asked me what she could do to help them stop idealizing each other, idealizing adults, but get to know themselves. And I said, mindfulness. And then I found your book that you illustrated on mindfulness, and it's really magical. Could you tell us a little bit about how you see the importance of mindfulness and what it is?
Yeah, so thank you for for sharing this story that connects very well to like what mindfulness can help with. Mindfulness, I wouldn't give like a definition, a definition you would find in books. I would say what it represents to me. It means cultivating a state of presence, which we very often forget about because we are in this automatic, let's say, habit of just doing things. We have stuff that we need to do. We have like an agenda. And sometimes we rush into these things. We rush into our days thinking about the things that we need to get done. But very rarely we take this time to really connect with ourselves and ask sometimes ourselves, like, is it what I'm doing the best use of my time right now? Or how do I feel when I do this? How do I feel when I do this job? How do I feel when I do this course? How do I feel when I'm by myself? Cultivating this state of presence and awareness of our physical body in the space where we are, how the other things influence us through our senses. What do we feel? What do we see? What do we sense? How is the light? Is it dim? Is it bright? How does the wind feel on our face or the sun? All these things help us to be more in our body and grounded and connected to ourselves. And this is how we can hear ourselves better.
How do you think your illustrations have helped bring that out?
I put a lot of thought into my illustrations, into the process of when I see a text, I just connect with like the state that it gives me. And I feel like this is a mindfulness practice in itself, because I'm trying to reflect how the text, how that image that the author is trying to send out is reflected back at me. What do I want to send out to kids? How do I want this to be? And by just like noticing my own feelings and my own perspective, how I embody these things, then I'm trying to show them in a way that I feel would connect with kids.
Can you give us some specific examples?
Yeah. For instance, there was this text where it was exactly like I listened to my body and my mind. And like, this is how I get to know what's true to me. Kind of like this is the idea. And I illustrated a little girl somehow in nature. It was not very, it was a bit more abstract, but she was staying on a tree trunk with her hand on her heart, eyes closed, and like really breathing in and connecting to herself. And I really enjoyed that image because I've inspired myself seeing other kids doing this. Whenever I'm illustrating something, I'm researching about, let's say, children practicing mindfulness in school or somewhere else. And I notice how kids reflect these practices. And then I try to recreate that feeling. I find that real life footage and images really help me to portray exactly that message, because it's not only my imagination. I collaborate with whatever is in reality.
So what you're saying is that you're asking students to be very present, and you need to be very present. And I say students because I'm an educator, but I mean children. But you need to be very present. And so you're practicing exactly what you're actually portraying in your artwork, which I find fascinating. My question for you is, you're from Romania, you've lived in the UK, you've lived in other countries as well, or just those two?
Just those two. I've been traveling, but not living actually like now.
Okay, so my question is really the pace of life, because as you said, we need to slow down, and that's very difficult for most of us. And I have to say, I'm from New York. It is really, really difficult. And I haven't lived in New York for almost more than 30 years, and still it's in my blood. And I can hear my angels keep saying, you've got to slow down. You have to be present in the very now. And it's the most challenging thing I have in my life right now, which is not such a bad thing, to tell you the truth. But when I look at your illustrations, the sensation I get is, you know what, stop and look at the details. And I think that's magical, because I love stories. I love reading. I lived in stories when I was young. It was my escape. It was a safe place. And so I'm very particular about illustrations. And when I wrote to you and said, "Oi, Bianca, I just want to wade through your illustrations barefoot," I meant it. There's an expansion in those illustrations. So let me go back to the question. What is the difference between the pace of life where you're from? And I don't think we can generalize all of Romania, but let's just say where you're from, and the UK where you're living now.
Yeah, that's a very interesting and good question. So where I'm from, I'm actually from a town located in the mountains. It's surrounded by mountains, and it's a lot of nature here. It's my hometown. And I feel such a nice space here. Like everything is quite slow and quiet, especially where I live right now. Where I am right now, I can see the mountains. I can see the nature if I look outside the window. And this gives me such a feeling of ease and joy and comfort. It's very rejuvenating. And whereas London, I can't generalize, but I feel like most capitals where I've been to, also Bucharest, the capital from Romania, is a lot more hectic. Everything is at like speeding up. I feel like everyone is so busy doing things, and they are like hustling, and they are going places, and it's so much to see. And so I feel it's very easy to get distracted when you live in a place where lots of things are happening outside and lots of movement, it's very dynamic, and you don't get the chance to like just slow down and see nothing moving, and listening to some birds singing, which happily I can say that in London, there are many beautiful parks that are very large and very well taken care of. And you can do this there. I often go to the parks and enjoy myself because there I can find this peace. So you can find these places also in busy cities, maybe in New York too, I guess.
I would say it's a little more challenging in New York City, but there are parks, and there's Central Park, but Central Park has a whole rhythm to itself. So I haven't been in a long time that I didn't find peace in the parks. And I'm not saying there isn't peace, but I didn't find it. There's just so much energy in New York City, which is a great thing if you want to keep busy. And usually if you're living in New York City, you really want to be there and you value the energy. But the book I was talking about before, I think it's called Yogi Power, Raise Your Game from the Inside Out, right? And so what you're describing is not letting the external determine how you feel, but rather learn how your internal spirit and your internal energy can express itself outwards. Is that a correct way of saying it?
Yeah. Yogi Power is actually a mindfulness game for families to spend quality time together and also have fun, because it challenges children and families to perform different poses, yoga poses. And it also it guides them through the process, pointing out the small mindfulness things they can be aware of. And it's a very nice game. I had so much fun designing the characters. It was quite challenging in the beginning because getting all those poses correctly, children's illustration is a field where you can have fun with stuff and make things a bit more stylized. It doesn't have to be realistic, yet to be able to make those poses in a way that kids can mimic them. It was a bit challenging because I had to really look at the pose. Some poses required some changes when I first made them because I wasn't aware of how things really need to be. And there's another book that I was recently published about mindfulness and about how feelings are connected to needs. It's called Sometimes I Need, by an author, a very nice author, who's basically all she's been doing is writing children's books on mindfulness and social emotional learning. Her name is Gabriela Garcia. And this is the latest book I published with her. And it's very beautiful for me and also challenging from other aspects, because I wanted to we wanted the book to be very diverse, to show kids who maybe are differently abled. Maybe they're in a wheelchair, or maybe they have a prosthetic arm or something, and different races, different nationalities, parents as well. So it was quite a diverse book. And that was challenging, but in such a good way, because it made me see once again how diverse the world can be.
I think that's absolutely beautiful, because I work with a lot of teachers, and there's so much more diversity in the classroom now regarding special needs than there ever was before. But having said that, I also realize that there's more diversity in cultures, given all the immigration, the migration, the wars that are going on now that are forcing people to move. And the languages are challenging for these teachers. But physical needs are not addressed almost in most literature, in most student books. And so it's absolutely fascinating that you and the author decided to celebrate all different types of physical manifestations.
Yeah.
How has it been welcomed into the classroom? Do you have feedback yet from parents or teachers?
Well, actually, not too much feedback yet. It was released quite recently, but people who know the author's work, and they've been ordering the books, and they saw her posts about the book and the cover. And also I read some reviews, because there are a few reviews right now, and people are quite happy and impressed by the message, because it's a very inclusive message and something that everyone can relate to see that actually sometimes we have some feelings can emerge from needs that maybe we are not aware of, but they are there, and probably they haven't been met. So when we meet our needs, then also our emotions will transform as well. So there are like signals pinpointing that, okay, maybe you have a need that you need to fulfill. What's your need? And it opens a dialogue as well, because sometimes a kid who might appear to misbehave can actually have some unmet needs. So then we can see what are those needs. Maybe it's a need to connect, to feel understood, to feel loved, to be accepted just the way he is. And that goes a bit more like, it's more profound than just seeing a kid and labeling him or her as, okay, this kid is naughty. He's not behaving well. He's a problem kid. I've seen these things, and it doesn't do any justice, and it's not true.
You're reminding me of why fairy tales are so enduring and so endearing. People always respond to fairy tales so positively. Why? Because fairy tales are stories about archetypes, the king and the often mute queen, the evil stepmother, and the prince's obligation to save the princess. If we don't take them literally, it's because then we just get mired in a patriarchal message, and that's not really what they're about, though it's definitely something we need to address. And we can see that in modern fairy tales, they're maintaining the archetypes, but through more gender fluid roles. All fairy tales are really about patterns that represent elements of our own lives, and they're told in ways that are more accessible to young readers, and frankly, adults as well. Young readers love fairy tales because they intuitively pick up on the underlying messages of good and evil in society and what's acceptable in a society and what isn't. Because if you look at the same fairy tale type in different cultures, you'll see how the cultural message comes through. But mostly there's a universal truth in fairy tales, and that's why we love them even as adults. Good always wins. But the bridge between my reference to fairy tales and your choice in including illustrations of physical diversity is that fairy tales need to be used as the basis for opening up conversations about what's appropriate and what's not. And that's what you're saying your illustrations are for, opening up conversations about wounds that are visible, we can say, and those under the surface. Even though there are so many children who don't have physical manifestations of pain, for instance, a prosthetic arm, or they sit in a wheelchair, or they are blind, for instance, or deaf. Those things we can they're tactile, we can pinpoint them. But the emotional wounds are not visible necessarily. And so what you sound like you're doing is with this book is opening up a conversation of things that we can see, wounds that we can see, but also wounds that we can't see. And so it sounds like this book is going to give children and parents and a whole wide audience the opportunity to start talking about this. Is that something that you expected or didn't expect?
It's something that I expect, and I wanted this conversation because it's very important. I feel like, especially because some things can be interpreted in a wrong way. And I feel like that child can get a very wrong impression about themselves, about how they're supposed to be, how they're supposed to act, maybe even fall into a pleasing pattern or something because they see that their emotions are not accepted by the others. So, okay, if I'm not accepted, then what should I do? Be more pleasing towards the others, suppress, bottle up. And those emotions, in a way or another, they find a way to go out somehow because it's a tension, and our body, it needs balance. So it will always find a way to rebalance. And this can be maybe in behaviors or in things that are not supportive for kids. And it's like this goes far beyond in someone's future. I can see this in myself. I can see, like, I can relate. And now that I'm doing this kind of work, I'm also reminding myself of different stuff. And I remember how maybe I used to be as a kid, or who maybe some of my friends and colleagues at school. And I can understand things better. I feel like just by understanding these things, we can become so much better and give such great opportunities for our future.
So what I hear you're saying is the more we know ourselves and the more we have the opportunity to express ourselves, the more viable we'll be in the world around us. I am an educator, so I see things through the lens of the classroom. But in the classroom, I believe in bringing the world into it. And the mindfulness and getting the affective domain, which is emotional intelligence, is primary. If we don't address the emotions of our students, they just aren't learning. And what you're saying is one thing that teachers tend to do, and I include myself in this if I'm not careful, is we sort of give our students labels. Oh, that boy always acts inappropriately, and that girl is always crying for no reason, et cetera, et cetera. But what we need to do is find out why the girl is crying and find out why the boy is restless and find out why that group of students is always arguing. And if we can get behind the emotions and behind the motivation, then we have a learning environment. And just getting behind the motivation is a learning environment. So again, the books that you're talking about, you're seeing in the secular world. I see how important they are in the classroom because it helps students get to know themselves. I'm interested about the apps that you were working on before you moved to the UK. You said you were working on educational apps?
Yeah, there were some apps that were meant to guide children to train different inner resources. This is how we were calling them, to some characters that were animated, and they were very friendly, and they represented some like inner superpowers, because kids react very well at this, like having superpowers. And there was this central character who represented like the inner child in a way. He was an alien. This is how we portrayed him. Very cute little guy. And he came into the world to learn about humans and emotions and understand how things work, because we wanted an external character who can, like, kids can relate to him and to see how he sees the world and how he's curious about different things, because this triggers also curiosity in kids. When a cute character is like asking himself, then you become more interested. And we were like a startup. This was a startup, so we were not too many people involved. I was on the illustration side and character design side, and my partner, he was on storytelling. He's great at stories, and just creating these stories where the character sees different stuff, or he hears about children who experience different situations, and he asks himself, or how can I help them? And there's this other character, it's called like Zendu. It was his name. He was the personification of the universe, or the greater power, whatever the name is. And he was like teaching this character about how humans work, but in a very nice and very warm way, not in a patronizing way. He was just replying to his curiosities. So we try to pack everything in apps that kids can use and parents can use. And we also integrated this part in live shows that we held in different schools, in schools where kids were maybe very poor and they didn't really access high education, in hospitals where kids suffered from cancer, and we went there to help them train their courage. Because the funny thing is, kids were quite brave, but their parents had a lot of fear towards what the future would help for the kids. So I feel like this helped parents as well, because sometimes kids can absorb the energies that are around them. So if a parent might be very fearful about whether the child would survive treatment, chemotherapy, or different stuff, he could pass on this fear or stress. But kids, I saw that they were, like, in general, they were happy. They were playing at the hospital. They didn't really care that they had this disease, how people call it. They just minded their own business. but parents needed more support and encouragement because they didn't know how to cope with this very like sad event. So we did all this work in different kind of schools and environments and disadvantaged environments to see how kids react and to help open up a dialogue. And many kids, I could see the transformation, and also educators were reporting us like feedback. Okay, these kids, they didn't fight as much anymore. They didn't have this conflict. They started to talk about their feelings more, which was unheard of before.
And what happened with the app? You said that you left it, or is it still available? What's happening?
It was not an app that was available necessarily for purchase. What we tried to do is we tried to get funding from different like investors, angel investors. There were some startup competitions and different stuff. And we got great feedback, but I feel like maybe it was not the best environment to present this work to, because maybe people were looking for something that could monetize, invest in, so they can monetize quicker, and they didn't really know all the like what's involved in developing an educational app. So that's why this didn't go through to receive funding. But like my partner, he continues to do this work in different places in Romania. Now he's also applying it with kids from Ukraine, because we have many kids from Ukraine here. And he's going to kindergartens, to schools. He's talking with like teens and children and doing these shows that are very beautiful, and they integrate more elements like magic tricks or different stuff. He uses all this as metaphors, so kids can understand different abstract concepts in a way that's very pleasant to them and that relates to them.
Okay, it's really magical what you're talking about. And I was just speaking with the educational sort of technological guru, Russell Stannard, and he's very adamant that while technology has this reputation of taking away jobs, it also is actually creating jobs, and it's creating opportunities. And what you're saying is it's creating this opportunity to take this sort of archetype, the superhero you created, and help children and their parents learn about themselves, explore different facets of their personalities and their spirit that maybe they wouldn't have been able to otherwise. So I hope perhaps if he does it in English, it might be more, it's horrible to say because Romanian is an absolutely valid language and it should be funded just on its own. But oftentimes English is the global language and people look at it in a more financially lucrative way, we could say. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. Like the language is not a problem, and it was not a problem. I feel like the proof of concept, or like finding the right people who are also parents, this is important. I feel like people who are also parents themselves, they understand things better because they are more invested and they really connect to the message. And they treat things very differently, especially the parents nowadays. I find that they are very aware of the things they lacked maybe as kids in education, just because people didn't have access to all this information and it was not in focus at that time. But now that they are parents, they are facing different situations like tantrums or different situations that come in a child's life. They don't really know how to answer to this, and they are looking for methods, for solutions, for because they want to give them a better chance. So I find that it's just finding the right people sometimes who will believe in your idea and they will invest, even if maybe it will take a bit of time to translate the stories, to find a native English speaker or someone who can like actually translate and make the voice of a character very nice and cute and appealing. So anything can be done as long as you also connect with the right people. And maybe it's just a matter of like time or chance to connect with those people. I'm quite optimistic.
I think it's wonderful. And it sounds like your energy really makes things happen. So I'm sure it will. And then, so my question is an easy transition into this. How do you see books next to movies or television shows, or what other sort of manifestations of stories are there? I'm wondering if you see the validity in books, in reading, as opposed to children watching cartoons or watching a movie based on a book. The importance of books in the world. What's your opinion?
Well, I feel like books are very special because it's like that written word there that has so much meaning. And when you see it, when you read it, I feel like there's a very different process to how connections are being made in the brain by reading versus watching something. Because when you look at a movie or cartoon, depending on the cartoon, to be honest, I feel like some cartoons are very quick. Everything is very quick, very dynamic, and very agitated. Sometimes the characters have a voice that is very distracting and disturbing. Like I listen to it and I wouldn't like to hear a child speaking like that. It's just, like it's not them. It's inauthentic, I would say. Some cartoons, to me, they appear to be like this. And I feel like the brain doesn't really process too much how things are going on, and it's not stimulated to imagine things way beyond what they see, what it's given in a TV. But when you read a book, it's like a whole world opens up because your imagination just fires up. It's ignited by so many things and the way you imagine a certain story when you read it, it's so different, even if it's a picture book. And let's say you have illustrations that guide you. Still, there is a lot of space for imagination and for your own interpretation and contribution. As an illustrator, I would like to say that when I started to illustrate children's books, I wanted to learn how to do this because it's not just you illustrate what you feel. You try to illustrate in a way that it complements the text, but it's not showing exactly what the text is. And maybe you can create by adding different characters or details, like secondary narratives that kids can see and they can imagine their own stories going from that, as you mentioned about, I would like to, when I see your illustrations, they have these details. That's the purpose of those details, to invite kids to expand and create their own stories. So I feel like it's a different process to me, but they go together. They can go together. Why not?
Absolutely. What you're doing is subconsciously teaching them that not the words themselves, we don't have to just take the words literally. We can interpret them, which is exactly what you're doing. You're interpreting them into images. And what I would also add to your gorgeous description of the importance of the book is, even if we're reading an ebook, to me, it is not the same thing. And I've given up 3 or 4 ebooks just because it's not the same experience. Having a book in your hand is a sensory experience. The feel of it, you can hear the pages being turned, the smell of it most of the time. The thing is, I watch children all the time because I know that I used to do it and probably still do when there's an illustration like your illustrations, where you stop and you take the time you need to look at all of the details, and you don't turn the page until your soul has been filled. You feel as if you've seen everything you need to turn the page. And even as we're turning the page, there are words that click into our eyes that we remember as the page is turned. And I'm sure you probably do that without being aware of it. I'm very aware of it because I realize when I'm looking at an ebook or reading, who knows, a health book on the computer, when I turn the page, it is definitively turned. There's nothing that helps my mind make the transition. I need to finish the page to the last word, and then I'm on to the next one immediately. So there's things about reading a book that is just non-translatable. You just can't translate it to technology. And I think we're seeing that books still exist with all the technology we have. And thank goodness, right?
Yeah, it's a huge market. Like, books are a huge market. Children's books are a huge market. They continue to be, they have been, and they will be. And there are more and more books being produced to fit very diverse needs that kids have. And sometimes I like to look at how what things appear, different projects or stuff or innovative books, and I really enjoy seeing that people are mentioning this, like one of their purpose for creating a book is to help kids like also detox a bit from too much technology and give a meaningful time for them to spend with themselves without other distractions, connecting with this book.
How could you see children taking the books you've illustrated and furthering the experience? In other words, maybe creating different endings to it or creating their own illustrations and sharing them. In this way, we would include technology because perhaps there would be a platform for the book, and different children from different parts of the world are sharing their own illustrations through the lens of their own culture. And they can also write to each other. So in my mind, all of a sudden, I'm adding technology, which I did not mean to do. But my question really is, how can we extend the experience and the learning from the books you're illustrating?
Well, I feel like what you suggested can be such a great example of just engaging kids in finding maybe different solutions to some situations the character is facing in the story. Maybe like you don't turn the page in the book, you don't turn the page until maybe you ask the reader, what can they do? What would they do? And it can be like a conversation, maybe with the child reading and the parent, if the parent is reading to them, or in school, it can be done as well. Or why not? It can be an app or a platform that has different scenarios and kids can suggest different endings and they can draw whatever happens or how the character will feel eventually doing that. I feel this would stimulate problem solving, which is such a great ability to have nowadays, because when you are more engaged in problem solving, you see that you don't take things just as they are. If someone says it cannot be done, it's impossible. Yeah. So many people have done amazing things because they went beyond the no. They went way beyond whatever others thought it was possible for them. So just finding things, finding solutions, finding different ways engages kids in seeing the opportunities and the possibilities that they can access. And it makes them to feel like they are empowered and they are the creators, and they don't necessarily need to consume something as it is, but they can also just invent their own stuff.
I love that, because there's something I encourage teachers to do all the time, and that's to use a questioning continuum. And it's starting with the basic direct questions, but moving up into processing questions, because what we need to do now is encourage our young students and even older students to process information and come up with creative solutions or creative alternatives, or to predict what's happening in a more inclusive way. And so what you're saying is, engage the student. I mean, I'm not sure if you've done this with any of your books, and maybe you can certainly suggest it to some of the authors. I'm giving you all these ideas right now. You might not even care about this, but I'm always looking for ways to involve the students in their own learning. And if a child is reading a book, just predict how it's going to end. And if it ends differently, then they can decide if they like their own ending or if they like the author and the illustrator's ending. And they can just sort of begin a dialogue about their experience, their predictions, their hypotheses, and what is actually published. Because as you say, the book is published, but it doesn't mean that that has to be the end. It can be the beginning. It can be a whole discussion, and it can be a whole exploration. So, oh my goodness, I'm having so much fun with all your books. What would you like to do, Bianca? What would in your ideal world, where would you like to be moving towards?
I would like to move towards like some sort of projects that are a bit, maybe it's not just a book, but they continue in a way or another, either with other books or on different media, as you suggested. It can also be online, or it can be some sort of toys. Or sometimes I really like to imagine how some of the characters I create, they can actually become physical, some sort of toys that can be helpful for kids to learn different stuff. Sometimes even play therapy uses this kind of either puppets or little toys that they move around to create different scenarios. It helps kids engage easier, I feel. And it can be so many things. Like, I feel when a project has some sort of it continues in a way or another, it gives more opportunities to expand on different subjects, to see the characters evolve in different ways, grow up, mature, make different choices. Like, it creates also that kind of engagement when you grow up with a character and you see them shifting and making friends, or like having a life of their own, let's say, not just with a book that finishes when it's done. Sometimes I fantasize about this kind of project that can become so much more, maybe even a TV series, maybe, who knows, like collection of songs, who knows.
And there's a toy company that I'm absolutely in love with in the United States. It's called Bella Luna Toys, and they believe in using wood for toys. I'm going to send you their information because I would love you to be in contact. And who knows, they're connected to the Waldorf schools, but I think that it's pretty secular as well. Their philosophy is children need to be touching wood. Children need to be touching something authentic. And with your illustrations, it's very possible that could be translated exactly into what they're working on now. So let's explore that, because it's not just digital that you can go to. Toys, even if your beautiful dinosaur, what is the book that has your dinosaur with the children sleeping and reading on top of it?
That was not a book. It was an illustration for a library a friend made.
Oh.
Yeah.
And where's the library?
It's an online, it's not necessarily only online. She made it for her neighborhood because she lives a bit outside of the city. So she wanted to create a library for the kids who are in the neighborhood. She also has 2 kids, 2 little boys. And what she did after I helped her with this, like a cover picture and a profile cover. And she got lots of books. She already had so many, but she opened up this library in her living room there where she lives. And parents are coming with kids to borrow books and read them. And she has so many right now. And she's very happy that she made a difference, in her neighborhood. That's amazing.
I'm going to tell you a little secret, Bianca, because I haven't talked about this except one little neighbor, my 7-year-old neighbor. There's an abandoned house right next to me, and I live in a very small town, and there's no library. And what I've been wishing for, and I've been meditating and praying on, is funds to be able to turn that abandoned house into a library so that all the children in my town can come right next door. And I've thought about little alcoves where they can read and they can curl up and have pillows and just dive into books and live in books. And I'm going to have you come and be our guest author and illustrator. How would you like that?
I would love that. Oh my God, that would be so nice.
You're going to have to speak a little bit of Spanish probably, but you can do that already, I'm sure.
I will take some classes before.
Bianca, this has been such a dream speaking to you about it. What I love the most is that not only your illustrations are so gorgeous, but that you have this verbal ability to explain them with words, which is not usual for an illustrator. Usually with an artist, their artwork speaks for them. But you have a way of creating artwork with your explanations, with your verbal explanations. And I've really enjoyed everything you've been telling us.
Oh, I'm so touched.
Yes, I can't wait to see more of your illustrations. I can't wait to see more of the books that you're going to put your heart and soul into. And you're going to tell us where we can find you, and I'll upload it onto the bio page. You've already sent me some information. Anything else you want, please do.
Right now, I have an Instagram account, which I use as a website because I feel like I just can explain so much better there and keep in touch with people. And it's called Bianca Nita, Nita illustration. Maybe it's a bit long, but you can put it there somewhere. And yeah, people can follow my journey there for now. And it's been such a pleasure having this conversation. All these insightful questions that you had made me just expand my imagination on what's possible, and even more stuff maybe that I would like to create in the future. So thank you so much for being such a wonderful host.
Oh my goodness, it's so easy. It's been so easy. I haven't had to do anything. I'm just going to hold on and wait for your next illustrations and your next projects. Okay.
Thank you so much for everything.
Thank you. Thank you.
So that's the conclusion for now of our talk with Bianca Nita. I, for one, am so looking forward to how she extends her learning. Will she create wooden toys with Bella Luna toys, work in television, creating appropriate sounding cartoons based on her characters, use a digital platform to unite children around the world and predicting, hypothesizing, sharing endings of stories, and creating their own illustrations of friends of the characters in her books? We'll check back in with Bianca soon and find out. In the meantime, have fun in your classes and at home, and find activities that can support your learning at scaffoldingmagic.com. See you soon.